Hi, I'm Krista Gregg, your host for She Diaries, a podcast sharing the real, unfiltered stories of women who've lost their husbands to suicide. It's raw, it's honest, and it's about finding your way through the unthinkable. Before we get to the show, please know this podcast includes real stories of suicide loss and is not for little ears. Some episodes may reference the method of suicide and include emotionally intense or uncomfortable descriptions. We understand how sensitive this content is and carefully edit each episode to honor and respect both our guests and listeners. If you or someone you love is struggling, call or text 988 or visit 988lifeline.org. You're not alone. Please take care while listening, pause if you need to, and you can find links to additional mental health resources in our show notes. Thank you for listening. Welcome back to She Diaries. I am your host, Krista Gregg, and today's guest is Michelle Bray, who lost her husband, David, in August of 2024 after 34 years of marriage. It hasn't even been a year since David died by suicide, and this is Michelle's first time publicly sharing her story. And she does it with so much grace and breathtaking honesty. I think you guys are all going to really enjoy and learn a lot from her story. She opens up about the decades long impact of alcoholism and addiction on her family and the years she spent trying to hold everything together through all of the chaos. But this isn't just a story about loss, it's a story about rebuilding, about therapy, about finding support in unexpected places, about a future that still holds joy, including her first grandbaby on the way. If you've ever felt trapped, heartbroken, or simply unsure how to move forward after unimaginable pain, this episode is for you, and I promise there is hope. Michelle's words are a lifeline for so many, and I'm honored to help bring her story to light. These are feelings drag me away. Fingers crossing now on my way. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of She Diaries. I am thrilled to be joined by Michelle Bray today for this episode. She has a heartfelt story to share with you, and it hasn't even been a year since she lost her husband, David. So, whatever you're doing, going on a walk, drinking coffee, driving in the car, buckle up because we are here for this incredible story. And before we dive in too deep, Michelle and I have actually been talking. We're laughing because it's so ridiculous. Have been we scheduled this an hour and a half ago to record, and
Yep.
have had to try to troubleshoot some audio issues, meaning I couldn't hear her. And it was one button.
It was one button.
It was one button. What does one button mean to you, Michelle?
It is hilarious because David was in the news industry. He worked in the news industry for 30 years. And his go to was, it's always one button. And what was it? What was one button?
It was one button. It was the most ridiculous thing. Anyway, we won't waste your time with all the very technical details, but I will let you know that in celebration of not only the 4th of July, which is when we are recording, but also to be able to get this to work, we just took a tequila shot. So let's have a little fun here. We're gonna have a little fun. We're gonna be sharing the story, and I
I'm
just
excited to share our story. Gosh. And, along with the whole one button thing, 4th of July was David's favorite holiday. He loved 4th of July. I mean, we would decorate the front of the house. We would get tons of fireworks. We'd invite tons of people over to the house. We'd have all kinds of fun on 4th of July. And one year where we didn't have anybody over, he's like, it's my favorite holiday. We have to shoot off fireworks. I even have pictures of him in our garage, and it is pouring down rain. And he's like, I just looked at the app. It's going to be over in 5 minutes. We'll just hang tight and then I'll run out and set off the fireworks. So I am excited to be here on 4th of July and to talk about my husband and basically our journey through this life and you know what led up to losing him with death by suicide. Like I said, he was in the news industry for 30 years. And if he was here right now, he probably would have figured it out. But I feel like he was with me. And he, for whatever reason, it had to wait until now. Maybe he wanted us to take that tequila shot. So
There's a little dark humor in my mind with the tequila shot because we are going to talk about alcoholism.
I know. Yes. Yes. Which is a very serious, very, very serious disease. And it affects not only, you know, the person that is the alcoholic, but it affects the family so greatly and so deeply that it is not a laughing matter. But whenever you are dealing with life, right, there's got to be ways that you release some of that tension, release some of that pain that you have. And that was always David's way. It was never about serious conversations about alcoholism. It was always keeping it light, keeping it happy, keeping it funny, and keeping it. And he was always joking around. He was always looking what I thought was the brighter side of things. But in the long run, it was lots of depression, lots of trauma, lots of PTSD that he dealt with that finally just don't think he could move past it anymore. And regardless of how much help he got or how much I begged for him to get help, he just could not get past all that. And that's finally what I think that he decided in his brain that it was never ever going to get any better and it was always going to get worse. And
Yeah. So let's start from the beginning. How did
yeah, let's do that. So, you know, we were really young. We were I was 17 actually. Craziest thing. And I know people are gonna go, oh my gosh, she's just off her rocker. But I was walking through a parking lot, and him and his mom were just coming out of a store. So I was 17, he was around almost 18 years old at that time. And they were in their car leaving and I was walking towards the store and we just caught eyes. And I just knew when I saw him and our eyes locked that there was something there. I couldn't explain it at the time. I look back now and say, oh, you know, it was, you know, could have been, you know, two souls connecting. It could be love at first sight, blah, 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 you know. But in the end, I think we were supposed to meet that way. We were supposed to see each other that way. And as I was walking and they were driving away, we didn't take our eyes off each other the whole time. And so that was the first time that I saw him. And then you fast forward about, oh gosh, I guess it was about 6 months later, we ended up being at a local hangout together. And all the teenagers in the area would go to the same place on Friday, Saturday nights and hang out. And he asked me to go out with him, and the rest is history. We moved in together. I ended up getting pregnant about 9 months later after moving in together. And then went about 4 months after the baby was born, we got married. I was just, and him too, I truly believe we were both just so in love and just couldn't be away from each other for long periods of time, you know, and so anyway, anytime babies come into the situation, things become very complicated
we?
all the time, you know? And so when the baby was born, we had lots of financial difficulties, you know, making sure roofs over our head, making sure that we could give what we needed to give to the baby. And it put a strain on our relationship. Obviously, it does for anybody in any situation, but then you add a child to it, and that makes it even more complicated. And so we made the decision that, you know, working in dead end jobs was not going to get us where we needed to go. And I made the decision to start taking courses at the local college in Indiana when we lived in Indiana. And so I started taking college courses and it must have sparked something in him because he looked through in those days, you got a book of all the classes available, to take in your college that you're going to. And so he said he one day was just flipping through the book and it stopped in television broadcasting communications was actually the major. And something told him you'd go enroll in these college courses. So he actually didn't even have his high school diploma at that point. And so he went, he took the GED. He passed the GED with flying colors. I knew he would. He was a smart man. He just didn't have the effort that you're supposed to put into those kinds of things. So got that GED, enrolled in classes. So we were both working. We were both taking classes. We were both taking care of a baby and then found out we didn't figure out how that happened the first time and got pregnant the second time. And so anyway, working through college, taking these courses, and we made it to our senior year in college and ended up pregnant again. Great baby.
How old were you guys at the time?
And let's see, this was 95. So he was 25, I was 24.
Okay, so you guys are still young. You're in love and you're doing things and you're spit out college and
Yeah, just trying to figure out, because we knew at that point that well, originally we said we do more kids. Well, it was a little too late for that. But knew that staying where we were in Indiana, that we were not going to be able to sustain the family and have the life that we had. And knew that I knew all along, I was in banking, he was in the TV industry, that we would have to move for him to make more money because being in a small city, when you're working in the television business, when you move to bigger markets, you make more money, right? And so obviously we knew that. And so he started looking. I gave him a radius. I said, David, you can look in a 3.5 hour radius of home, of where our parents were. And so he was offered a job in Kentucky, it was like 2 hours and 45 minutes from home base, and so I told him, I was like, "Take it," and he's like, "Well, you've gotta find something too," and I was like, "Okay." So I started looking and landed when we were in Indiana, I was a team lead at a bank and running, like, a call center, and so when he got the job offer in Kentucky and I started looking and started interviewing, I landed a supervisor's job at a call center in Kentucky and ended up making more money than him, which pissed him off, but, that's another story.
journalism's hard. Journalism is so hard. It's a tough market to be in no matter where you're at, unless you're, one of the lead broadcasts or reporters, whatever it may be. Journalism is an unforgiving profession. And at that time, too, it wasn't about clicks and it wasn't about money. It was more about reporting. But, things have changed as well. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Now, he wasn't on the news making side, he was on the technical side of
like the production.
yeah, so he was in what's called a newscast director. So anytime you see a change on the television set when you're watching the news broadcast, anytime you see a change, that's a director in the background pushing a button to make that happen. Or if you see a camera move, that's the director making that move or telling a camera operator to turn the camera this way or that way. Now it's all robotic. But back in the day when he started, it was actually him telling a person, "Hey, move the camera this way or that way or to this." They had set numbers and all this crap. I don't fully understand that, but that's the way he explained it to me. But yeah, so we made the move to Kentucky. We were doing really well. But I always knew that, I knew that alcohol was always an issue. It wasn't bad when we first got married, but it slowly progressed. And if you know anything about alcoholism, you know that it is a progressive disease that builds over time, gets slowly worse. And I think that some of his demons is what finally got him in the end. But in saying that, when the children were small. He knew how to deal with all the problems and things, but as they grew into teenagers and having a free mind and wanting to think on their own or maybe having their own ideas, I think that's where he had difficulty and just could not move past the point of them becoming young adults and being able to understand that I was more lenient, he was more strict, which just crazy to me because with him being loving parties, loving being a very extrovert, that he would be the opposite with the kids, that he would let them be more free and I was be the one that would keep them hold them back, right? But no, he was very he was I don't want to say strict, but he had 3 rules for them. Stay in school, and if you're not in school, you'd be working. If you're not working, stay out of jail, and that was his rules to them. Like, "Okay, whatever."
So you guys went to Kentucky, but then eventually you ended up in Charleston as well.
Yeah, no, and I actually was we lived in Kentucky for 20 years. We finished raising the kids there. Our oldest daughter actually graduated from the University of Kentucky. Middle child, he was working at a company in Kentucky. And then our youngest daughter, she was in college while we were there in Kentucky. And then I got laid off from my job. And it was a major blow. I'd been with them for a long time. I'd actually moved up through the ranks. And I was actually the major breadwinner of the family. I was, everything financially was, even though he had steady job, he was a high functioning alcoholic. He went to work every day. He did his job. He was good at his job. It's just after the job. But, there was some jealousy there of what I made and made more money. It was an ego thing that I was the breadwinner of the family. And so anyway, I ended up getting laid off from my job. And at that point, the alcoholism had become so bad where, not in a good point in his life. And, anytime you're dealing with alcoholism, a lot of things can happen. A lot of things when they are out of control. And some of the things that happen can be emotional, it can be physical, it can be a lot of different things with an alcoholic, and especially when they are out of control. And so when the layoff happened, it seemed to escalate a lot higher. After this happened and things settled down, I did end up getting a job, but I got a job in South Carolina, in Greenville, South Carolina, actually. And at that point, the alcoholism was so bad that I made that move by myself, and I told him I was going to make that move by myself. I felt like I needed time, I needed space, I needed to figure out exactly what I wanted, and that I felt like it was time for us to separate. So when I made that move, one of the questions, it was actually a corporate move. They came in, they packed me, they took everything, they put it in pods and sent it over to Greenville. And so he asked me, how long are we going to be separated? Because I didn't tell him at that point that I wanted a divorce. I just said that I think at this point it's best that you try to figure out yourself and try to figure out what you need to do to get away from having alcohol as your crutch every single day of your life. And, I said, at that point, let's look at the situation 6 months or a year. Let's live apart. We were kids when we got married. We brought kids into this world ourselves. And I think that neither one of us had the opportunity to grow into adults. We tried to do it together. And I think we did a pretty good job, but I think that the disease held him back in a lot of ways. Anytime you take any type of substance, right, it alters the brain function. And when you're continuously putting a substance in your body, your brain never fully gets rid of those of that substance, and so you're not thinking clearly. So it's a matter of that I felt like he needed to figure out himself. and I needed to figure out myself. I'd had enough. I was done dealing with situations of being out all night or being gone or not knowing where he was. So anyway, made the move to Greenville and we did live apart and I thought he was getting better. We talked daily. He moved into his own apartment. He was doing well, still had the same job he always had. But little did I know that he was still doing a lot of things and more at that point. But again, whether I was being naive or not, he ended up getting a job in Greenville and moved. But at that point, I didn't even let him move in with me. We were still married and everything, but I felt like I wanted him to be in the same area and us spend time together and see if everything was going to work out. And so he got his own apartment when he moved over to Greenville and everything went well for a long, long time. We actually even bought our a dream home that we both really wanted and really loved. It was just something that we really wanted. And so moved back in together and that's where it all just seemed to go downhill. Not only was drinking even more, he was on other substances, cocaine. He was on what's the medication you take for when you have a
Is it Adderall?
yeah, taking Adderall on a regular basis. So what he was doing was trying to counteract the alcohol, which is a depressant, using the Adderall to try to bring him up because he wasn't a true ADD patient, right? And that has a opposite effect on you and brings you up and so on and so forth. Then at night, trying to sleep would take sleeping medications to try to go to sleep at night. And it all just came spiraling. So in 2019, we had an episode where he attempted suicide at that point, and he was out of his fucking mind. I come to find out later on he was doing moonshine. He was drinking moonshine,
Okay.
which is
High alcohol content. I'm assuming it was in store-bought moonshine.
this is backwoods, grown in the backwoods of South Carolina somewhere, right? And he was on the phone with his brother, telling him that he was done. He hated being in Greenville. He felt like it was the worst place in the world, which made me feel like shit. I got a job where I knew that I could make decent money. I made this decision. So him telling his brother, and obviously I could hear this whole conversation, even though he was out in the garage having this conversation with his brother and I was inside the house. He talked very loudly. His voice traveled. I could hear everything he was saying to his brother, and it just crushed me. But as he's sitting talking to his brother about all this and how he's feeling and just doesn't want to deal with life anymore, has his gun cabinet open. I'm beginning to get very nervous at that point, because we see on the news the murder, suicide things, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this could go south really fast.
Just really quick, there's a previous She Diaries. There was a police standoff, and one of the officers told them that once someone loses the respect for their own life, they can quickly then lose respect for anyone else's.
Absolutely. Very quickly, and it's a very scary situation that we were in, and I knew that at that point. And actually, my children are older at this point, right? They're older at the point of 2019. My son was born in 95.
Are they still in the house? Did they move with you to Greenville, or are they off in college?
So my youngest daughter moved with me to Greenville. She actually is which I'm very proud of. She's a pediatric um intensive care unit nurse. A lot of care, a lot of love there, which is amazing to me. I'm like, oh my God, I raised a decent person, in the middle of an alcoholic situation. But my son was actually there with me because my youngest daughter had gone, she was on vacation somewhere. She had went, I can't remember. I think she went to her sister's or something in Atlanta. So anyway, my son calls 911 and, hey, we need to get somebody out here, causing all these issues. And two, while it should be the last thing you worry about, right? It's embarrassing. Your neighbors know what the fuck's going on. They know that they can hear all this disruption and everything. And so the sheriffs come out and he plays them off. He plays them off. Everything's fine. Everything's good. No, I'm not, there's no problem. I'm not suicidal, blah, 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 blah. So they left.
They left. They didn't even get you
No,
they give you any option.
they didn't even come and talk to me. They didn't even come and talk to me. One, I was inside the house. I did not want to go out there anyway. I didn't even want to go outside anyway. So they didn't even talk to me. They talked to him the whole time.
Feel like that's even more dangerous. This is assumptive, but okay, so police are called. He waves them off. Police leave. I can only imagine he could be feeling a lot of things, but one of those things could be anger at you guys
Yeah. For calling
calling
the
back
police.
for calling the police and for trying to get him help, but it's help that he doesn't want.
Right.
And did the
Exactly.
situation escalate or how did things
So it ended up escalating at this point. It wasn't an escalation on me, but and I apologize. I said the gun cabinet was open. The gun cabinet got opened after the sheriff had left.
happen? So that's
After. So that's what prompted my son to call the sheriff the second time or the police the second 911 the second time.
okay.
And the 911 operator told him and me to get out of the house immediately. Said, "Get out of there. Don't stay. We'll send somebody. Get out of the house." And so I I I didn't have access to my car keys, I didn't have nothing, and so I put the dog on the leash, and we just started walking down the street, started walking down the subdivision street, and just to get away while my son's on the phone with 911. Eventually, the sheriff did show up. So, during this situation where we're walking off, the sheriff shows up, he had gone in, gotten a butcher knife, and starts slashing his wrists
No.
everywhere, slashing his wrists, and they finally I don't know all the details because obviously I'm not in the house at the time, and they finally get him to drop the knife, and they put him in an ambulance. Obviously, he needed medical attention at that point. So, move forward, we had to fight with a doctor to get him help. He went into the hospital, told them they were fine. They gave him treatment, wrapped up his wrist. They said it was superficial. I told them, I do not want him back in my house. Do not allow him out of that hospital. He needs He needs mental health. He needs help. He needs alcohol attention, help with his alcoholism. Actually, what had to happen was my brother-in-law had to get on the phone because they were gonna release him. They did not believe me. So, what ended up happening is my brother-in-law gone his brother got on the phone with the doctor and had to sign documents saying that we would not sue that doctor if they placed a psych hold on him for 30 days based upon this.
You're not just obviously protecting yourselves without him realizing it, you're trying to save his life. You're trying to get him help.
Absolutely. You're putting yourself with knives, saying you wanna die. Obviously, there's something that's not right there. They're very, very wrong.
Was he ever open to getting help on his own? Did he even think he had a problem? Okay.
A and actually, when he was younger, he was in AA. He knew he had an alcohol problem. He went to AA for when our son was born. He was in AA. I was going to Al-Anon. That lasted for about a year and a half, but he refused to do anything about it.
You
So
guys him in the 30-day cycle, then
yeah, the 30-day cycle, but what ended up happening is David agreed to go to rehab. He voluntarily said, "I don't want to be here in the mental health ward at the hospital or place that they sent him, that the inpatient place they sent him." He said, "I'm going to elect to go to rehab." And so I was like, "That's fine, but I still don't fucking want him back. I do not want that man anywhere near my children, near me. If he is to if something goes wrong, then he relapses, No, don't want him anywhere near me.
And crust is gone. I
Yeah.
mean, you were already trying to separate, you welcomed him back, and then it escalated even further. He needs to figure his traumas out. He needs to
Yeah.
figure out how to handle his emotions and deal with the things that are going on that are making this happen, as well as the alcoholism.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree 100%. So he goes to rehab, and keep in mind, this is the height of COVID.
Okay. Well, yep.
We're in COVID, right? So everything's shut down basically. One of the things that you're supposed to do when someone enters rehab, or the place that he chose to go to rehab, was the family comes and they have like family therapy also. And at that point, he would be allowed to call family or whatever, like 15 minutes every day or something like that. And that's fine. And we eventually were talking, and he became very spiritual, and he became very clear-minded, and I recognized the man that he was before the alcoholism progressed to the point where he became this crazy. And so I felt like the rehab was working. I felt like he was committed. I felt like that it was something that it was going to be okay and it was going to work out. But so anyway, after rehab, 45 days goes by, he's in rehab, I let him come home.
I don't want you to judge yourself here.
I feel tough on myself.
Don't be tough on yourself, because here's the deal. You have loved him for so long. As
Yeah,
the father of your kids, there's a lot of trust that has been broken, but there's also hope.
yeah,
There's hope. There's for someone that you love, for somebody that you deeply care about, for somebody that you want to get better. And when he's in rehab and you see glimmers of this person you deeply love, I think anyone naturally would say, what if this is working?
yeah,
What if this time this is a great
true.
path? So I that is okay. Your response, I wanna give you permission to know that that is okay.
Yeah. It's a matter of hindsight being 20/20, right? And
Yeah.
as I continue my story, but you make the decisions that you feel like are the best for everyone at the time. I wrote this list. I mean, there was like 30 things on this list that he had to abide by to come back to the house, to come back to my life, you know? And one of them was go to AA, go to doctor's appointments, listen to what the doctors tell you. You know, he worked second shift, so he'd like to listen to the television loud at night. And I'm trying to sleep because I work first shift. You can't have the TV blasting in the middle of the night because I've got to have my sleep too to be able to function during the day. It just things like that that I wrote out in this list of things that the expectations when he came if he came back.
He comes back, what happens? Like, how does
So he comes back, it's great. It's great. It's wonderful. It is a man that wanted I could tell he was going to AA, he was, you know, it wasn't perfect, don't get me wrong, but he was a lot different human being, period. But fast forward a year, he lost his mom unexpectedly and he relapsed at that point. And he went from 0 to 1,000 in a very, very short amount of time. Very short amount of time. Ended up I had actually had another job offer. A company came recruiting me and offered me a position here in Charleston, South Carolina. I've always wanted to retire on the beach. It has always been one of my goals in life is to be able to retire when I retire to be on the beach. And so I was like, oh, this is a sign. I need to go, you know, this is perfect. You know, at that point, even though I knew he had relapsed at that point, it wasn't bad, but we moved. It jacked his whole world up, fucked his whole world up. He actually got a job here at a TV station. He just, every single drug he could get his hands on, every single bottle of alcohol he could get his hands in. He was drinking 24/7. And on August the 12th, he sends me a text. And in that text, it says, it basically lined out what happens when someone dies in the first 5 weeks of death, of losing someone, and it said, in the first week, everyone is sad, everyone is in mourning. In the second week, you begin to understand that you are in grief. In the third week, something. In the fourth week, something else. In the fifth week, you're just a memory. And he said, "I'm so sorry I lost my rebuilt." And he sent this text to me and and sent it to his brother. It was a group text. And I had actually was that day, I was actually in an attorney's office talking to an attorney about filing for divorce because I knew that it wasn't ever going to get better. I had never actually gone to an attorney. I have threatened to divorce him many times,
Yeah.
but I was sitting in the attorney's office and I was walking out of the attorney's office and I had heard my phone go off that I got a text, but I didn't look at it. But as I was walking out of our office, I got this whole, I can't even explain the emotion that I felt. It's like someone kicked me in my stomach and knocked the air out of me feeling. And I look at my phone and saw his text. And the first thing I knew he was gone. I knew he was gone at that point. I could feel it. I knew he wasn't with me anymore. And so anyway, walk out of the attorney's office. I call his brother because obviously it's a group text and me and his brother. I'm like, what should I do? What should I do? Because in the text also, he indicated you never know what happens when a gun goes off accidentally while cleaning it. So that tells me that he has a firearm. So I'm scared to come back home. No, he's got a firearm. I don't know what I'm gonna do, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, my brother-in-law is like, just call the police and have them go do a wellness check. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't know. I just had all kinds of thoughts. You don't think clearly in that type of situation. And keep in mind, as I was raised in a very strict Catholic family. And being raised that way, suicide is you're straight to hell. You are done. You're never coming back. So I also call my son and say, "Brenton, can you meet me at home because of what was going on?" I explained everything that was going on to him. And so he's like, "I get off at 5:30, go sit in the parking lot and wait for me. As soon as I'm off, then we'll go home together. We'll go to the house together." I was like, "Okay." It was about an hour and a half. So I went and I sat in a gas station parking lot and I said rosary over and over and over and over in that hour and a half, waiting for him to get off so that we could end up at home together. Fast forward, we get home, we come in the house and we walk all through the house. We're like tiptoeing. I don't know why we were tiptoeing, but we're tiptoeing through the whole house. Not exactly sure what we're walking into, right?
Really quick, you mentioned something when you pulled into the driveway.
I pull into the driveway and I see the shed doors standing open, which is unusual. Not out of the ordinary, but it was weird. There was a little finch and it was sitting at the top of the one of the doors that were open. It looked at me. I looked at it, stared at me for at least 15 seconds. It got my attention for that amount of time. I know that doesn't sound like a long time, but it was a long time in my brain. Looked at it and then flew off. And I knew that was Dave. I knew it was Dave telling me goodbye at that point, but it didn't all register until everything was over. And so anyway, we're walking through the house. He's not in here. And I was like, he's in the shed. He's in that shed. I know he's in that shed. And you have to imagine it's not a tiny shed. It's a woodworker's shed. He loved working with wood. He made lanterns. He made candlesticks. He made planters. He made all kinds of stuff in his wood shed and sold them on Etsy and stuff like that and to local people. And I could not gather the courage to go look in that shed. And my son, and he's 32 years old at the time, which doesn't matter. It's still your child regardless of how old they are. But he finally said, "Fuck it," and said, "I'm walking out there." And I'm like, "Brenton, don't walk out there. Don't walk out." I didn't want him to see something like if my intuition was right, I didn't want him to see something like that and be scarred for the rest of his life, right? And so he walks out there and he walks to the edge where the doors are open. He looks in there, looks to his left, turns around and screams, "Go back in the house," and slams the shed door shut. And I was
So
like,
that was the confirmation.
yeah, that I knew he was gone at that point. Didn't know how at that point, didn't know what happened, and I dropped to my knees and screamed no, because at that point, I know he's gone, and Brenton gets on the phone, and he calls 911. The operator actually, the 911 operator said, "I need you to go back in there and check and see if he's breathing." And I screamed. I said, "No, do not go back in there. No, do not go back in." Again, running through my brain, no person should see their parent or any other human being uh, um, passed away from suicide. So basically, the first sheriff shows up and he comes in the door and he's like, "What's going on? What's going on?" And I'm like, "Out back. My son's out back. My son's out back." And he didn't even understand what I was saying. I don't think the 911 operator conveyed that my son was the one that was calling in, or at least it doesn't seem like it. And so the sheriff's like, and then my son comes to the back door and the sheriff like put his hand on the gun on his gun. And he's like, "Who are you?" kind of thing. And my son put his hands up like this. And he said, "My it's my dad. He's out in the shed. I think he's dead." And the sheriff's like, "Okay." And then walks out to the shed. From there, EMTs showed up. There were sheriffs everywhere. We live out on an island of Charleston, and so it's not in city, so sheriffs were everywhere, on my street. My street was blocked off. The EMT comes in at one point after they've been out there for a while, and he said, "I just wanna let you know that I've been with your husband at this time, but I just wanna let you know it doesn't look good." And I'm going, "Yeah, because he's fucking dead." Again, not knowing how, didn't know, but I knew that he was gone. I knew he was gone at that point. I'm sitting on my couch inside the house, and I have these officers coming in and out. I have EMTs coming in and out and in and out. And all I could think of was, "No, you can't tell me he's gone because a coroner has to tell me that." I knew that that's a state law. Somehow I knew that. I don't know how, but I knew that an EMT worker cannot, tell someone deceased. It needs to be someone, a doctor or coroner. So anyway, the coroner shows up and comes in and talks to me and tells me that David's gone. But well, let me back up, because before the coroner came in, Clinton was separated from me because I was screaming that I wanted my son. I wanted him, next to me and near me, while all these people are going in and out. But they pulled Brenton out of the house and it said, "Come with me. We need to talk to you," and put him in the back of the sheriff's car, and question him. And one of the questions was, Brenton told me this later on, was, "Where did your dad get the gun?" And Brenton's like, "What gun? What are you talking about?" Because again, we didn't know at that point that David had taken his life with a firearm, with a gun. And Brenton's like baffled, right? He doesn't know what he's talking about.
Is still treating this like a criminal case versus
My house is a crime scene at that point. No yellow tape or drama like that, but still I've got, the street blocked off. I can see out my front window that there's at least 5, 6, 7 sheriff's cars sitting outside my house. Ambulance, fire truck shows up. So anyway, when they're done talking to Brenton, the detective that was there, he, I guess, was talking to other emergency people and stuff, and comes in my garage door to the house and says, "How's everybody doing today?" I'm sitting on the couch in the living room thinking, "Motherfucker, how do you think I'm doing?" The most had his big smile on his face, just juvenile type, just not treating the situation, understanding what anyone was feeling in that situation, or that moment of their life. And
It's another day for him on the job, and for you, that was a pivotal life-changing moment, and there's no empathy or understanding or even emotional awareness of y'all and what you're going through.
yes, absolutely. Just the whole I've seen this 50 times kind of feeling, and everybody should be fine. And I no, I'm not fine at any point. And so after he did that, I think he kind of caught himself because I kind of saw the change in his face because he came in and sat down on the recliner in my living room and then asked about a text. And I told him about the text. And then Brenton came and got me. He left and Brenton came and got me and they said, "They need to talk to you." And I was like, "Okay." He said, "Go out front of the house." So I walk out front. Okay. Neighbors walking down the street, people looking out the windows and everything. He's on the phone, this detective. And I'm standing in the middle of my street for at least 5 minutes going, "Okay, you wanted to talk to me." He gives me this, he's on the phone. He gives me this just a minute kind of thing. And I'm going, I'm standing there. Standing there praying and also going, please don't let me start crying in the middle of the street, in the middle of my subdivision.
There's no privacy. There's no element of privacy, and your neighbors can see everything. Like, it's
Yeah.
and you're still being treated like you guys are separated and questioning to get different statements, and at this point, you're still being treated like, "Hey, did you do this?" And I know that police have to do their investigations, but I feel like there's some tact missing in some of this.
Yeah, at one point in my brain, it went to, "You have an hour and a half that you can't explain. No one could vouch for you for an hour and a half." So they're thinking that you had this motive because you were, saying that you wanted this divorce, and you had this was all running through my brain that they possibly could be thinking that I did this to my husband, so I'm kind of freaking out on that, but also in a state of shock. I'm also grieving at that point. I'm also thinking my husband is burning in hell. So all these things in this whole big wad of brain thought, right? And shock and just trying to figure, going, "Oh my god, am I gonna go to jail?" Kind of those thoughts also ran through my head like, "Oh my god, what am I how am I gonna be able to explain my time and blah, blah, blah," and then later on, hindsight being 2020, they could have tracked my phone, right? I had my location services on, like, I could have proved that I was sitting in a parking lot, right? I sat in that car for at least 20 minutes, him drilling me with questions, and he did not stop, and I know this sounds kinda like I don't know what it sounds like, but once I start crying, I felt like then he believed me.
Like, you were showing the right reaction at that point. You were giving him the reaction he needed to believe you versus just straight up believing you. I think that that is just so frustrating because if you don't act a certain way, then there's cause, and everyone acts so differently, everyone reacts so differently. I'm sorry you had to go through that. I genuinely am, and I mean, you're finally believed.
You have to understand that when you're in this type of a relationship, you learn to how to control emotions because if you have the wrong reaction at the wrong time could cause problems in this type of a alcoholic relationship. So for me, it was understanding how to control my emotions for a long time. And I feel like in that sheriff's car, I was able to hold my emotions for so long because I had taught myself for so long how to do that. And for me to be put through that drill of the questioning is just unimaginable. Imaginable. And you're right. Everyone reacts differently. And that was part of the why I reacted the way I did. So, what ended up happening was this detective that did all this questioning, and he was the one that came in the door and made the "How is everybody doing?" comment and everything. His boss showed up to the scene and kinda took over, and that's when the coroner came in and told me, "David's gone, blah, blah, blah," even though I knew he was already gone, and he took over this detective took over, and him and the coroner sat with me. So and we're talking from the time period of about 6 PM. They didn't leave until 10 PM that night. So 4 hours of going through all this. At one point, the coroner told me, we have to take him out of the shed. And, I said, I don't want to see him. And he said, absolutely not. He's like, go ahead and close the curtains and stuff so that when we bring him out, you don't have to see anything like this or anything. And luckily, the shed is on the side of the house where there's not many windows. And so they finally take him away. I mean, that's how the coroner put some of the pieces together, told me that he did use a small caliber, um, handgun, didn't tell me where. I know it was somewhere in his upper extremities, or extremities that he, took his life, and that's our story. That's how I lost my David. Um
How so everybody eventually leaves. One of your children, no, but you still have 2 other children to tell,
Yeah.
a funeral to plan, and this
Yeah.
has kind of been now your last nearly year of a lot of times when this happens, people say, "Well, business comes first, the business of planning the funeral, the business of telling everybody, the business of the estate," and whatever it may be. How has the after and from the immediate planning to date, and how are things with you and the kids to the that you want?
That evening, after everyone left, I called, actually texted my youngest daughter and asked her if her boyfriend was with her. They lived together, and because I wanted to make sure that they were with someone when I made had to tell them. And, because she still lives up in the Greenville area. I'm in Charleston, 3 hours away. But anyway, I call her and I told my youngest daughter, and my husband and my youngest daughter were the closest of the three children. There was something there between them, and that was the most difficult call I had to make. Uh, because my son had called my brother-in-law his brother while the police showed up, so he already knew, and then did the same thing with my oldest daughter, made sure that her boyfriend was with her, and then she actually had COVID at the time, was sick in bed, and I didn't know that, but I remember clearly the conversation with my oldest daughter because I got on the phone and I said, I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm mad, I'm beside myself. I'm I'm every emotion you possibly could think of right now because all I could think another thought that I was having is I'm finally free, which brings a lot of guilt, but I'm finally free. So her exact response to that was, I'm having the same emotions right now. So, um fast forward through the time period of planning, his wishes were always, hindsight being 2020, there were several conversations in the weeks leading up to this, which should have been triggers for me, or alerts or alarms going off, made conversations with me. And understand this was over several weeks of time. He said that, we could take all his t-shirts and make it into a t-shirt blanket, a memory blanket. He had that conversation with me at one time. I don't know how it came up. Said that he told me, he's like, I just want to remind you that my wish is to be cremated. And I was like, okay, what brought that on? I remember actually asking him. I just wanted you to know. And I said, well, you'll be dead and gone. What do you care at that point? I'm going to bury you. And he's like, you better not put me in a box in the ground. It was very serious, and I blew it off. understanding during that time that he was drinking heavily again that I was done. I'm not putting up with this shit anymore. So those kind of conversations, they didn't 1 plus 1 in my brain, right? That he's telling me that he's planning this and several weeks beforehand. Another conversation was that I make wreaths. I had found wreath making years before when I figured out that I had to figure out something for me. I had to figure out a way other than work and taking care of the kids and taking care of him and taking care of our home and everything. I had to find something where I could release my stress. And just out of nowhere, I found this video or found a live of making bows, and come to find out, I have a little bit of a knack at doing this stuff. So anyway, he made the comment to me, you need to be making funeral or memorial arrangements and wreaths. I sell on Etsy. He's like, when you make and put on Etsy, that's something you need to work on. Hindsight being 2020, that he told me all those things, it's like, ooh,
Over like, not all at once, over the course of a few weeks, right? And, this has clearly been on his mind, but he's not coming out and saying it either. And in our pre-meeting, you said something really powerful, which was like, "I knew I needed to leave him or else I was going to die myself."
yeah.
It would your mentality at this point, and I don't want to skip through this. This is really critical. Your mentality at this point is also survival mode for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. It's to the point, it was to the point where I was trying to decide if I wanted to continue my life with him, without him, or at all. I was in the midst of losing myself totally. And the only thing that kept me going was routine, is knowing that I don't even know exactly what was keeping me going at that point, but something was telling me to keep going. And my decision was to file for divorce. Even though in the back of my brain, I knew that I was never gonna get away from him. I was never gonna be free from him, but at least it would be in separate houses, it was what I was envisioning in a divorce, you know? I knew that some way, somehow that I had to get out of there, or I was going to I had had thoughts of killing myself because I didn't know any other way to become free. I didn't know how to get away. I didn't know how to stop what was happening. I had tried everything I could think of. I'd be mad, I'd be happy, I'd drink with them. Nothing worked. Nothing worked. And that, while I knew that wasn't the answer, because again, being raised in a very strict Catholic household, that's not the answer to the problem, right? But it doesn't stop somebody's brain when you're in that type of situation of, how do I be free? How do I get away from this? I can't live like this anymore. So, yes, that was a time. And actually, when I knew that I was going to go see the divorce attorney, at the same time I set up a therapist appointment. And I think it was a godsend that I had that appointment was the day after seeing the attorney. So, in knowing that David kills himself on the 12th, the 13th, I'm seeing a therapist and telling her all this. It was a godsend that I had somebody that I could talk to that soon, right? Because most people have to wait, a time period to be able to sit down and talk to somebody. Even though I was brain fog, widow fog, whatever you want to call it. My brain is shut down. At least I had somebody to talk to, because at no time other than sending a chaplain to my home did any of the authorities offer to get someone to help me. No one was offered to help me.
Everybody just left and moved on to the next emergency.
Yep.
Yeah. At what point, and this is something I definitely wanted to quickly touch on, because how you found the podcast as you started listening to Alexandra Wyman's Forward to Joy.
Yes.
Our and she's guest 2 on She Diaries. How did you find her, and what did that mean to
Oh
you
my
to be able
God.
to hear other stories and hear from firsthand experience?
Yeah, it meant the world to me. Just one day, well, let me back up. So my mentor, Reese, she recently, about less than a year ago, started a podcast. So whenever she does her live, she's like, "I'm gonna start this podcast, blah, 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 blah." So, I've been listening to her podcast. I just wanna give shout out. I love you, Julie Samaco. You are everything to me. You have helped me so much. But anyway, thought, you know what? There's gotta be some type of podcast out there that for widows that have lost someone, a widow to suicide. There's gotta be something out there. So, it just one day, I did a search and found Forward to Joy's podcast. And I listened to every single one of her podcasts. And the very first one is going through the experience of losing her story of that day and what happened in her losing her husband by death by suicide. And then one day I saw that she was going to be on your podcast, and that's how I got here. That's how I got here. But not only did I listen to Alexandria's story in her podcast, the now that listening to her, she had a guest on hers by the name of Elena Worley, who I see as a therapist now. And I've been seeing her for almost a year now. I see her in the first weeks afterwards. I was seeing her twice a week. I'm now down to seeing her like every 3 weeks, but I truly believe that finding Alexandria, something told me to look for that podcast or find that podcast, and has led me down to finding each next step to help me heal. One of the things that I learned in this journey was you know how to deal with trauma, you know how to deal with depression, you know how to deal with all this the bad things. What you need to learn is how to accept joy, how to accept happiness, how to accept love, and how to self love yourself again. You know how to deal with all those bad things. You don't know how to accept all the good things. And that is something that was very powerful to me that I've learned that during this journey. Also, another thing that I've learned during this journey is whether you believe in it or not, that there's signs. And I also learned that there isn't complete damnation for people in this situation because I asked God, I was like, God, how, if you say you're a loving God and that you love everyone, how can you damn someone that is in mental anguish, that has a disease, that even though they didn't want to get the help, how can you do that being a loving God? It is something that I truly believe that our spirits go to another place, whether it's to learn, it's to, help and guide and to heal, that it's not eternal damnation, that it's not a forever sentence to someone. So that was really powerful to me also, but I could talk for a long time about all that, but
No, it's a full circle moment for you though. It is a from being in the gas station parking lot and saying the rosary and hoping that his soul is saved because you genuinely knew at that time without proof that he was no longer with you. And then now he's watching over. I mean, we were saying before this, he probably delayed our podcast just to remind you it's just a button. I mean, see him, it's just hum. Well, that and, there are signs and, for him to see you today sharing your story and to get through the last 11 months, do you think he'd be proud of how far you've come? And
I think so. I mean, he always, even though he was a shed, he drove me nuts. He always, I always called him Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde because when he was sober, he was the best husband that I could have ever asked for. He was encouraging, said I was beautiful. It was a different human being and was very supportive of everything and was very proud of me and was always talking. Friends would tell me, "He always talks about you. We get sick of hearing about you, blah, blah, blah." And I'm like, I don't know that. But anyway, I think right now that he would be even more proud and more happy for me. And I don't know. I would love to, have you ever seen those things on, posts on Facebook? It's like, if you could have 30 minutes with someone that's passed away, what questions would you ask them? And it's like, gosh, I would love to ask those questions.
well, that'd be a long and quick 30 minutes all at the same time. Well, I know one of the things you wanted to talk about too is blessings, and you are gonna have a grandbaby soon. It's
Yes.
A year later, life is still moving on and you still are seeing the blessings and you're seeing, the next steps and still the future is bright, for you and for your kids.
My youngest daughter, she, found out in December that she is pregnant, which is our first grandbaby. It may be the only grandbaby, but I will take it and love it and hug it and squeeze it and kiss it. But, yeah, and then my oldest daughter, she got engaged in March, and I know this sounds awful, but these things would have never happened if Dave was alive. All 3 of my children had made a decision long ago that they weren't having children, they weren't gonna bring them into this type of I don't wanna say environment because they're out of my house, they're gone, but they were very scared to carry on any type or take it into another generation. I think they were trying to break the cycle, especially my girls. They're both very intelligent women and knew that, there's always a possibility of alcoholism in them or, bringing some of that trauma, generational trauma into their household and always told me that they weren't going to have children. So, in saying that, knowing I'm going to have a grandchild is extremely joyful for me. And knowing that my oldest daughter is going to get married, that it tells me that they can move on and that we can, that the cycle is broken. Even though it's the most horrible, horrible thing that's ever happened to all of us in our lives, it also tells me that we can survive this too.
One of the things that a lot of the women say, whether it's been 30 years, whether it's been just a few years, it's always just their biggest advice to anybody going through this is just give yourself grace. There's no right way, wrong way to move forward.
It's the hardest thing. People say it all the time, "Give yourself grace, give yourself grace." But boy, it's hard to fight those negative emotions, right? And that's one thing I truly give blessing to my therapist because if I didn't have her, I don't know where I'd be as of today. Because working through all those emotions because you have that negative chatter in your head and it can take you to very dark places. And I believe that those dark places is where David was. And if only, I can say if only all day long. But for me, having someone to work through those things and understand that I'm not alone, there is life after this is very important. If my story helps one woman out there understand, then it's all worth it to me. It's all worth it. It's all worth it. And I want to read one thing, if you don't mind, before we go.
No, this will be a great closing. Michelle, you're amazing.
And I said, if my podcast, and I'm no one special. I'm no one, I don't have degrees. I don't have, I haven't written books. I haven't done anything, but I just want you to know, people to know, and other women, because right now, the largest statistic 68% of suicides in the United States are white males at this point. So that means there's a lot of women in my shoes right now. And just know to keep fighting, cry if you need to, break down if you must, but don't you dare stop believing. Your journey matters. Your story matters. And when women rise, mouths move. So I appreciate
Those do. Thank you.
No, thank you.
You're going to be helping a lot of people, and your story matters. And I am so grateful you found me and we figured out a way to tell your story. Thank you so much, Michelle.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of She Diaries. We know these conversations can be incredibly heavy. If you're feeling overwhelmed or need support, please take a moment to care for yourself. In the show notes, you'll find links to mental health resources, crisis lines, and support groups. If you're in crisis or need immediate help, call or text 988 or visit 988lifeline.org. You are not alone. If today's story moved you, we'd love for you to subscribe, leave a review, or share the episode with someone who might need it. To stay connected, follow us on social media at Bright Sky House and subscribe to our e-newsletter at brightskyhouse.com. If you'd like to connect with a guest or share your own story for a future episode, send us a note at hello@brightskyhouse.com. Every story deserves to be heard. Thank you for helping bring this one to light. Until next time, I'm Krista Gregg, and this is She Diaries.
These are